Earth was broken and watching. They thought we were weak. They forgot. We are human. The year was 2150. For years, humans had feared war, not just war between nations, but something far worse, war from the stars. Then one day the sky burned, without warning. Giant alien ships appeared in Earth's sky. They were black, smooth, and shaped like knives. They moved like ghosts. No radar saw them coming. No missile touched them. The aliens didn't talk. They didn't explain. They only attacked. Cities fell in minutes. New York, Tokyo, Berlin, and Delhi, all gone. Their weapons were not like anything humans had seen before. Bright blue beams cut through buildings like paper. Explosions swallowed streets. The skies rained fire. Earth's armies tried to fight back, but their tanks and planes were useless. One by one, the governments gave up. It was not a war. It was a massacre. In the middle of this chaos, a boy named Zane watched from the shadows. He was only 10, and his parents were hiding in an old subway tunnel in London. The city above them was ash. Zane held his mother's hand tightly. She tried to smile, but her eyes were full of fear. His father, once a soldier, held a small pistol. It looked tiny compared to the alien machines. Suddenly, a loud humming sound filled the tunnel. The walls shook, lights flickered. Zane looked. Up they were here. 3 aliens floated down from the broken ceiling. They were tall, more than 7 feet. Their skin was silver and their eyes glowed red. They didn't walk. They floated just above the ground. Silent. Cold. Zane's father stood up and pointed his pistol. He fired. The bullets bounced off. One alien raised its hand. A flash of light. Zane's father fell. His mother screamed. Another flash. Then silence. Zane did not move. He did not cry. He just stared. The aliens looked at him. One of them tilted its head as if confused. Then they turned and left. Zane sat beside his parents' bodies for hours. He did not understand why he was still alive. Maybe the aliens saw him as weak. Maybe they thought a child could do no harm. They were wrong. Across the world, others were hiding too, in old bunkers, tunnels, caves, and deep forests. They were broken, scared, but they were watching. In a secret underground base in South America, a group of scientists had survived. One of them, Dr. Lena Mora, once worked on top-secret space defense systems. Now she studied the alien attacks. Every blast, every movement, every sound. "We are not winning this," she told her team, "but we are learning." They called their mission Project Reclaim. In another part of the world, a group of old soldiers had come together. They had no fancy weapons, just old rifles, homemade bombs, and anger. They trained in silence. Every night they listened to alien broadcasts, trying to break their language. They knew the aliens called themselves the Valari. And they had done this before, to other planets. Earth was just their next stop. But Earth was different. The Valari didn't understand one thing. When humans lose everything, they become something else. Something harder. Something dangerous. 1 month after the first attack, Earth looked dead from space. Fires burned. Cities were dust. Satellites were silent. But under the ashes, something moved. Zane was now living with a group of survivors in an old metro station. He didn't speak much, but he listened. He watched. He learned how to survive. One night, he found an old notebook. He started to write. They took everything, but "I'm still here. One day I'll make them remember Earth." Far above, inside their command ship, the Valari watched Earth through screens. "They are finished," said one of the alien leaders. "This planet is broken." But another Valari looked closer. "Some are still fighting. They are slow, but clever." The leader laughed. "They are just insects, let them crawl." And so the aliens relaxed. They believed the war was over, but they were wrong. Deep below the ruins of Moscow, an old signal tower came back online. A small red light blinked for the first time in weeks. It sent out one short message. "Reclaim is alive." Somewhere in a cave in Africa, a girl picked up the signal. She smiled. "They think we are gone, but we're just getting started." And in the darkness, Earth waited, wounded, angry, watching. Because when humans fall, they don't stay down. They rise, they fight, and this time they would fight back. The silent plan begins after the aliens' attack. Earth was silent. No more cries of defiance, no more speeches from leaders. All that remained was the cold sound of destruction. The cities were reduced to rubble. The world was empty. Yet somewhere in the deepest parts of the planet, a different story was unfolding. In a forgotten underground bunker, deep beneath the Andes Mountains, a secret group gathered. Dr. Lena Mora was no longer just a scientist. She was the heart of a growing resistance. Project Reclaim, once an idea, had now become the planet's only hope. "We need a weapon," Dr. Mora said, staring at the holographic map of the Volari fleet. The map showed the alien ships circling Earth, waiting for the final blow. "Not just a weapon," whispered Captain Voss, an ex-soldier who had lost everything in the invasion. "We need a signal that tells them we are not dead." But how could they do it? Earth's military was destroyed. Most of humanity had been driven underground, and the Volari had technology that humans couldn't even understand. How could they possibly fight back? In the underground bunker, Dr. Mora found something that could change everything. Hidden in the old records, she discovered a long-forgotten Earth defense system. It was built over 50 years ago during the early space age, a weapon so powerful that it had been deactivated, forgotten, and buried. The system was called Aegis. It had been designed to defend Earth from threats beyond the stars, but the scientists who built it had never thought an invasion like this would happen. Now Aegis was the only hope for humanity. The system was buried deep beneath the Arctic, frozen under miles of ice, and it had one key to activate it: a special code. A code that was known only to the last surviving members of the original Aegis team. The problem was simple. They had no idea where those people were. Far away, in the shattered remains of what had once been Paris, Zane, the boy who had seen his family taken by the aliens, was becoming something else. The boy who had once been helpless sitting in the ruins of his city was now a soldier. Not a trained one, but a soldier of survival. And every day he grew stronger. One day, while scavenging the wreckage of a destroyed communications tower, Zane found something. It was an old radio. At first he thought it was broken, just another piece of junk. But then it cracked to life. A weak voice, barely audible, came through the static. "Aegis, activated, signal, lost." Zane's heart raced. He didn't know what Aegis was, but he knew one thing. It was important, and that message was a sign. There were still people fighting back. Somewhere, deep underground, there was a plan. Meanwhile, in Africa, another small group of survivors had discovered the same message. They were experts in technology, and they recognized the signal for what it was. A distress call, but also a signal for hope. They began to work, quietly and carefully, gathering pieces of old technology from the wreckage of the world. They weren't just rebuilding, they were preparing for war. "We may not have the power to destroy them yet," said Sierra, their leader, "but we have the knowledge to make them fear us." They had no weapons, no armies, just knowledge. They started hacking the alien tech they had stolen, trying to find its weak points. They didn't know how, but they would find a way to turn the Volari's own technology against them. On a cold night, in a quiet part of the world where no alien ships flew overhead, a small team of human survivors made their first move. Using what little they had learned from alien signals, they launched a surprise attack on a Volari communication station hidden beneath the ocean. The attack wasn't much. It was only a small sabotage, nothing compared to the massive power of the aliens. But when the Volari stations went dark for just a few hours, it was enough. For the first time since the invasion, the aliens felt something they had never expected: fear. The humans weren't just surviving. They were learning, they were adapting, and they were striking back. But the Volari were not fools. They knew that their dominance was being challenged. In the vast alien command ship, The leader of the Valari, Admiral Sarak, looked at the reports. His forces had begun to lose contact with certain stations. Small attacks were happening more frequently. "They are testing us," he said, "but let them play their games. We will crush them." Sarak knew this war wasn't over yet. He just didn't understand the humans yet. They would learn, just as the Valari had once learned about their own enemies. Underestimate Earth, and you lose. Back in the secret underground bunker, Dr. Mora stared at a hologram of the Arctic. She knew the plan was dangerous. To activate Aegis, they would need the code, and to get the code, they would need to find the survivors of the original team. But there was one thing that made her hesitate. The Valari had already discovered Earth's secret. They knew about Aegis, they were looking for it, and if they found it first, Earth would be finished. But the survivors of Earth had only one choice. There was no way back. They had to strike first. The plan had begun. The spark that lit the fire had started, but it was still only a spark. The world had been broken by the Valari, but the pieces were beginning to move. The whispers of rebellion grew louder, yet Earth's greatest weapon remained buried beneath the frozen Arctic, and time was running out. In the heart of the Arctic, Dr. Lena Mora stared at a wall of shifting ice. She knew it was there, the key to Earth's survival, just waiting beneath the thick layers of snow and ice. But the Valari were getting closer every day. The plan to activate Aegis was taking shape, but there was something they hadn't counted on. The weather. The cold was unforgiving. It could freeze a man's breath midair, stop the flow of blood in his veins. Even with the best equipment, it would take weeks to reach Aegis, and every second was precious. They had no time to waste. "We can't delay any longer," said Captain Voss, his voice as hard as the ice outside. "If we don't move now, we won't be the ones pulling the trigger on Aegis. The Valari will." Far away, deep in the desert of Africa, Zane was training. The boy who had once watched helplessly as his family was destroyed was no longer a child. Each day, he became stronger, more determined, and most importantly, smarter. Every movement was calculated. Every step was part of something larger. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. His focus was on learning what the Valari were really after. He had no training, no fancy weapons, only his wits. He studied the old books he had found, watching the patterns of the alien attacks. It wasn't just random chaos. The Valari were searching for something. Zane didn't know what yet, but he knew it wasn't just Earth they wanted to control. In the dead of night, while others slept, Zane climbed to the roof of the abandoned building where he had taken refuge. His eyes scanned the sky. The stars looked different now. Earth wasn't alone anymore, and the Valari were always watching. That was when the signal came again. A faint transmission, cutting through the static. A woman's voice, sharp with urgency. "Aegis must be activated, before it's too late." The message was brief, but it was enough. Zane knew now that there was something hidden beneath the ice, a weapon that could turn the tide of this war. And if he could find it, maybe, just maybe, he could bring Earth back from the edge of extinction. Back in the bunker, Dr. Mora and her team were preparing for their mission. They would leave at dawn, heading straight into the heart of the frozen wasteland. It would be dangerous. It would be a death sentence for most. But the few who volunteered knew this was the only way forward. They had no choice. As the team gathered, their gear, the weight of their task became clear. The Valari were not just invaders, they were hunters. They had destroyed worlds before, and they would destroy Earth if they could. The only way to stop them now was with the weapon that had been forgotten. Aegis. But there was a problem. Aegis isn't just a weapon, Dr. Mora said, looking over the map. It's the last line of defense we have. If we don't activate it before the Valari do, we lose everything. Then let's make sure they never get to it, Captain Voss replied. His voice was steady, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. They had no idea how the Valari would respond once they realized what Earth had hidden. But they knew the alien forces were relentless. The first attack was only the beginning. In the dark of night, Deep inside a mountain cave in the middle of the frozen wilderness, another group of survivors worked tirelessly. They were building something that might help tip the balance. They had no weapons, but they had knowledge. They had discovered something in the wreckage, something strange from the Valari tech. A shard. It was a piece of the aliens' weapon system, broken but powerful. The survivors knew it was part of a key that might unlock a weapon buried somewhere on Earth. A key that could change everything, but they couldn't decipher it. Not yet. One of the survivors, Sierra, a tech expert from Africa, spent hours each day studying it. She knew that time was running out. If she could figure out the code in time, it could lead them to Aegis. But she needed more. She needed the right team, the right resources. "We can't waste any more time," Sierra muttered under her breath. "If we do, Earth will never get another chance." Meanwhile, far above, the Valari were growing frustrated. The reports of strange signals coming from Earth had increased. The interference was becoming harder to ignore. Admiral Sarek stared at the monitor, his red eyes narrowing as he watched the patterns unfold. "They're hiding something," Sarek growled. "We need to find it, and we need to destroy it. Now." The Valari had never encountered this kind of resistance before. The humans were cleverer than they thought, and their ability to adapt quickly to their surroundings was making the invasion harder than anticipated. Sarek clenched his fists. "Prepare the final strike. We will show them what happens when you defy us." But deep in the heart of Earth's resistance, Dr. Mora and her team were ready. They were on the move. The mission was set. As the first light of dawn broke through the ice and snow, the small team of survivors set out toward the frozen wasteland. They knew the risks, but there was no turning back. They had a spark of hope, Aegis, and it was enough to light the fire they so desperately needed. The Valari didn't know it yet, but Earth had a plan that had been years in the making, and with every step Dr. Mora's team took, that plan grew closer to becoming reality. The eye of the storm. The winds of the Arctic howled as Dr. Lena Mora and her team made their way toward the heart of the frozen wasteland. The cold was merciless, biting through their suits, their gloves, their very bones. But nothing was colder than the truth they faced. If they didn't reach Aegis, the world would fall. And with every step, the weight of that truth felt heavier. Their journey had been slow, each step a struggle against the relentless storm. The vast, white expanse of snow stretched endlessly in every direction. The world had become a wasteland. Once there had been cities, homes, families. Now there was only the cold, the ice, and the alien threat that loomed over everything. "We need to keep moving," Captain Voss called out, his voice strained. His breath came in heavy clouds, frozen before it could escape his mouth. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, watching for any sign of the Valari ships. But there was nothing. No sign of them. Yet. Dr. Mora was quiet as she trudged beside him, her mind racing. They had no idea how much longer they had, how much longer they could hide before the Valari discovered what they were up to. It was only a matter of time. "Can we trust this map?" Voss asked, glancing at her as they moved forward. The icy winds screamed around them, almost drowning out his words. "This place, Aegis, it could be nothing more than a myth, right?" "No," Dr. Mora said firmly, shaking her head. "It's real. I've seen the records. It's not just a weapon. It's the only thing that can stop them." As they moved deeper into the ice, Dr. Mora couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air felt different. The snow beneath her boots seemed to shift and tremble with an unfamiliar energy. She glanced at Voss. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered. He nodded without speaking, his face grim. Back at the abandoned communications station in Africa, Zane's world had become one of silence and suspicion. For the past few days he had been watching the stars, waiting. The message had been clear. Aegis was the key, and now he had to find it. Every night the voices of the rebels grew louder, speaking of hope and resistance. But Zane knew better than to trust everything they said. The Valari were unpredictable, and they weren't just here to conquer Earth. There was something more. As he sat in the corner of the ruined building, his eyes fixed on a screen, he saw a faint flicker. The same pattern he had seen before. A transmission. Another message from the underground survivors. Zane leaned forward. The message was short, just a few words, but it was enough to make his heart race. The Valari are coming. They know about Aegis. His instincts screamed. The time to act was now. Zane grabbed his pack, slinging it over his shoulder, and headed for the door. He didn't know where Aegis was exactly, but the message was clear. The Valari were already hunting for it. The humans had no choice but to move first. Back in the Arctic, the team's progress had slowed to a crawl. The storm was worsening, and even their advanced equipment seemed to be struggling against the brutal elements. Dr. Mora felt a growing unease. Something wasn't right. Then, it happened. A low hum filled the air. It was faint at first, just barely, audible beneath the howling wind. But it grew louder, closer, until it was all Dr. Mora could hear. Her breath caught in her throat. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. Voss raised a hand to silence her, his eyes scanning the empty whiteness around them. The hum became a growl, a deep vibrating sound that seemed to echo from all directions. And then, like a shadow falling over the world, they saw it. A massive, sleek alien ship descended from the sky. It moved with an eerie silence, its metallic surface reflecting the pale light of the stormy sky. Dr. Mora's heart pounded in her chest. "The Valari," she whispered. The ship was massive, far larger than any human vessel, and it wasn't just hovering. It was circling them. "Stay close," Voss ordered, pulling his weapon from its holster. The others did the same, but they all knew that weapons would do little against the power the Valari possessed. "Is it too late?" Dr. Mora asked, barely able to breathe. They were so close to their destination, but now it seemed they would never make it. "No," Voss said with determination. We fight for Earth." The Valari ship continued to circle, but it wasn't attacking. Not yet. Dr. Mora glanced at the map one last time. They were nearly there. Aegis was just ahead, buried under miles of ice, but the presence of the Valari ship made the air feel thick with danger. And then, as if reading her thoughts, Voss spoke. "It's a trap." The words sent a chill down her spine. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze, suspended in time. "What?" she asked. "The Valari are waiting for us," he said, his eyes dark with understanding. "They know we're coming. This isn't just a random patrol. This is their last move. They're closing in. They won't let us reach Aegis." Dr. Mora's mind raced. Could it be true? Could the Valari have anticipated their every move? It was possible. After all, Earth's resistance had never been a secret to the aliens. "We have to move," Voss urged. "Now." They turned and began to run, their footsteps sinking deep into the snow, the sound of the ship's hum growing louder behind them. Back in the distance, hidden beneath the thick ice, the ancient defense system, Aegis, remained, still waiting, its power dormant, its secrets buried in time. But soon Earth would have its chance to awaken it, and when it did, the Valari would learn just how dangerous an awakened Earth could be. The wrath of the fallen, the wind screamed through the snow, biting, relentless. But it wasn't the cold that kept Dr. Mora's heart in her throat. It was the sound of the Valari ship above them. The ship, a silent predator, loomed like a shadow in the sky, its sleek black silhouette slicing through the swirling blizzard. They were being hunted. There was no escape now. "Keep moving," Captain Voss barked, his voice sharp against the howling winds. His breath came out in quick, visible bursts as they plunged through the snow, the team trailing behind him. Every step felt like an eternity. The ice beneath them was solid, unyielding, but above them, the Valari ship hovered, unseen but always there, watching, We're too close to stop now. Dr. Mora murmured to herself, more to remind herself than anyone else. They had no choice but to reach Aegis. If they didn't, it would be the end of Earth, and the Valari would wipe out whatever was left of humanity. We can't outrun them, one of the other survivors, a young man named Briggs, said through gritted teeth. His legs were shaking from the cold, but the fear in his eyes was worse. If they get the signal, we'll be dead before we even get close. Voss turned to look at them, his expression grim. We can't afford to think that way. We either get to Aegis or we don't stand a chance at all. It's that simple. Dr. Mora nodded, her hands shaking as she adjusted the device on her wrist. The countdown was ticking. They were close, so close. But the ship above was getting closer too. Its hum vibrated the air around them. It wasn't just a patrol now. It was a hunt. 1,000 miles away, in the ruins of a city once known for its beauty and culture, Zane was doing what he did best, surviving. His heart raced as he moved through the wreckage, the ground shaking beneath him from distant explosions. He had heard the rumors, the stories about Aegis, and now, he was certain of one thing. The world was heading toward its final stand. The Valari were coming. Zane had been listening to the same message again and again, piecing together the pieces of information he had gathered. Earth was not just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its soul. Aegis was the last hope, but would it be enough? He ran toward the gathering of survivors in a hidden shelter, their faces dim with exhaustion, but lit with a faint, flickering hope. They had heard the message too. We need to act now, Zane said, his voice a quiet force that cut through the room. The Valari are hunting the people heading to Aegis. If we don't move, we'll be too late. The silence in the room was heavy. The people of Earth had lived in the shadows for so long, fighting for scraps of hope. But now Zane was speaking of something bigger than survival. He was speaking of the chance to push back. We can't just sit here, he said. We have to join them, help them reach Aegis before it's too late. Back in the Arctic, the storm had intensified. The wind howled louder, tearing at the fabric of their suits, the snow blurring their vision, and yet the team of survivors continued to push forward, despite the heavy toll the storm was taking on their bodies. Almost there, Dr. Mora gasped, her voice barely audible over the storm's fury. But she wasn't sure she believed her own words. The blizzard was so thick it seemed impossible to see anything. Still, they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that Earth's fate hung on the edge of a knife. Suddenly, Voss stopped, his head snapping to one side. Did you hear that? The team fell silent, straining their ears. The sound came again, low and guttural, a growl that rumbled through the snow. Get down, Voss shouted, diving behind a nearby ridge of ice. A flash of light blinded them, then came the explosion. The shockwave hit them like a freight train. Ice shattered, snow exploded into the air, and the ground beneath them cracked open. Dr. Mora felt herself thrown to the ground, the world spinning as her ears rang from the blast. Her head throbbed and she could taste blood in her mouth. When the ringing faded, she struggled to her feet, gasping for breath. Voss was already up, his rifle, raised eyes scanning the surrounding white wasteland. They know we're here, he muttered, his voice a low growl. They've found us. Through the blinding snow, the outline of a massive Valari warship appeared. It wasn't just hovering now, it was descending. Slowly, menacingly. They've got us surrounded, Dr. Mora whispered, dread washing over her. Zane, miles away, had no idea how close he was to the chaos that was unfolding in the Arctic. He was already on the move with a group of survivors heading toward a hidden passage that might lead him to the one thing that could save them. Aegis. The stakes were high, but for the first time in a long while, there was a spark of hope in his chest. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The Valari were on Earth, and their presence was like a suffocating shadow, pressing down on the planet's last defense. Zane had no idea where the others were, but one thing was certain. Earth's final battle was about to begin. Back in the upper Arctic, the Valari forces landed. Dr. Mora and her team were trapped. We won't make it, Briggs said, his voice cracking with panic. We're done for. No, Dr. Mora said, her voice steely with determination. Not yet. We fight. The last stand. The world seemed to hold its breath as the snowstorm began to die down. The Volari ships hovered ominously above the frozen landscape, their dark forms like vultures circling a dying prey. Below them, Earth's final hope lay in the hands of a few brave souls, and the time to fight had arrived. Dr. Lena Mora barely had time to catch her breath before the first shot rang out, the crack of a laser piercing the cold silence. A burst of energy sliced through the air, hitting the ice beside them and sending a spray of frozen shrapnel flying. We're out of time, Captain Voss muttered, his voice low and urgent. His eyes were hard, his grip on his weapon steady. He looked at Dr. Mora, a silent question in his gaze. Could they make it? Before she could answer, the roar of Volari war machines filled the air, and the ground beneath their feet shook. The ships above were readying their weapons. Move, now! Voss ordered, diving behind a ridge of ice. Dr. Mora followed, her heart pounding as the others scrambled for cover. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. But in that moment, she could feel something in the air, a strange shift. Something had changed. The final defense wasn't just in Aegis, it was in them, in the people of Earth. They had been broken, yes, but they had never stopped fighting. In the distance, a line of survivors emerged from the ruins of a forgotten city. Zane led them, his face a mask of determination as he pushed forward through the snow. They had no idea what lay ahead, but they knew they had to reach the Arctic, to reach Aegis. It was the only chance. Zane's breath came in ragged gasps as he scanned the horizon. The storm was starting to clear, and the faint light of the sun peeked through the clouds. But it wasn't the weather that worried him. It was the distant hum of the Volari ships above. They were too close. They would never make it unless they moved faster. Pick up the pace, Zane shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. We don't have much time. The survivors pushed on, their faces grim but resolute. Earth's last fight was about to begin, and they would be part of it. Back at the Arctic, the first wave of Volari forces landed. Alien soldiers in sleek, dark armor emerged from the ships, their movements fluid and predatory. They marched toward the survivors, their weapons drawn, their eyes glowing with cold malice. Dr. Mora's team was outnumbered, but they weren't without hope. Voss was the first to open fire, his rifle unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. The Volari soldiers retaliated, their weapons a blur of deadly light. The ground around them erupted in explosions as the battle raged on. Dr. Mora could hear the crackle of gunfire, the hiss of lasers, but she focused on one thing: the path to Aegis. The weapon that could change everything was still just ahead, buried beneath the ice. We need to move, Voss shouted, pulling her toward a narrow passage that led deeper into the frozen wasteland. The others followed, but they weren't fast enough. The Volari were closing in. In the midst of the chaos, Zane's group was fighting its own battle. They had crossed miles of treacherous terrain, but now, as they neared the base of the mountain, they could hear the sounds of battle echoing from above. They're here, one of the survivors yelled, panic creeping into their voice. We fight, Zane shouted back, his eyes burning with defiance. We don't stop until we reach Aegis. We have to make it. The survivors fell into formation, using whatever weapons they had scavenged. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy them time. Zane knew they couldn't hold off the Volari forever, but every moment counted. If they didn't reach Aegis, Earth was done for. Back at the base, Dr. Mora was nearly out of time. The team was pinned down, and Aegis seemed further away than ever. The Volari forces were relentless, pressing in from every side. Every move they made was under constant fire, and their options were running out. We need to activate it now, Dr. Mora muttered to herself, her fingers moving over the control panel of a device she'd retrieved from the wreckage. It was their only hope, the final defense. But as she tried to connect to the system, the ground shook once more and a loud explosion rocked the ice. The Valari were closing in, their energy weapons carving through the landscape. The team had nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. "Lena," Voss said, his voice urgent. "We don't have much time. Activate Aegis now." Dr. Mora's heart raced as she typed the final sequence into the device. The countdown began, but just as she pressed the final key, an explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The lights went out. The countdown stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. The storm had quieted. The gunfire ceased. It was as if the world was holding its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the ground split open. A massive energy pulse shot out from deep within the ice, shooting upward into the sky. The Valari ships above recoiled, the energy knocking them back as the atmosphere crackled with power. Aegis had awakened. Dr. Mora stood, her eyes wide in disbelief. Aegis, the weapon buried beneath the ice, had activated. The power that erupted from the core of the Earth was unlike anything the Valari had ever encountered. For the first time since the war began, Earth had taken the fight to the aliens. But the battle was far from over. The Valari forces regrouped, their ships soaring back toward the battlefield, preparing to retaliate with everything they had. Earth had just thrown its punch, but now it would have to face the full fury of the enemy's wrath. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was a flicker of hope. A spark had been ignited. The final hour, the air was thick with the hum of energy as the sky above rippled with flashes of light. Earth had fired its first shot, a devastating pulse of power that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. The Valari ships had recoiled, their sleek forms twisting through the sky, retreating to regroup. But Dr. Mora knew it was only temporary. Aegis had awakened. But with it, the fight for Earth was far from over. Captain Voss stood at the edge of the ice, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding above. His heart raced, but his mind was focused. The Valari would strike back hard. Earth's counterattack had just given them a reason to make this their final stand. "We can't afford to waste this moment," Voss said, his voice low but steady. "The Valari won't hesitate to crush us. We need to move." Dr. Mora glanced at him, her face pale from exhaustion, her body bruised and battered from the relentless assault. But her eyes burned with a fierce determination. "Where's Zane?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Over the roar of the storm, Voss didn't answer right away. He turned, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the group of survivors. Zane was out there somewhere, still on the move, hoping to make it to Aegis in time, but time was slipping away. "He's close," Voss said finally, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But can he get here before it's too late?" The storm had lifted, but the Valari ships were descending, their weapons charging with deadly energy. They were circling above, preparing to strike. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the pulse of power from Aegis intensified. A second blast shot from the depths of the Earth, more powerful than the first. The Valari ships shuddered, their shields flickering against the force of the energy wave. But they were not broken. Not yet. Elsewhere, Zane and his group had reached the foot of the mountain where Aegis lay hidden beneath the ice. The landscape around them was scarred from the ongoing battle, the ground trembling with every distant explosion. They had made it through the worst of the storm, but there was no illusion of safety now. Zane led the way, his pulse quickening with every step. They had no more time to waste. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice cutting through the howling wind. One of the survivors, a woman named Elena, gasped as she pointed up at the sky. "They're coming!" she cried. The Valari ships were descending fast, their sleek forms now visible in full, each ship bristling with weaponry. Their black silhouettes cast a shadow over the group, and the air felt charged with danger. The survivors picked up their pace, their fear palpable, but Zane knew there was no turning back now. They had come too far. "We're close," Zane said, his voice grim. "We have to get to Aegis." But the ground beneath them suddenly trembled. Violent. Sudden. It was as if the earth itself was shaking with rage. The survivors staggered, trying to maintain their footing, and then, As if to answer their fears, the sky cracked open with an explosion of light. The Valari ships unleashed a barrage of fire from above, their beams cutting through the air, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. "We don't have much time," Zane muttered, pushing the group forward. Back at the base, Dr. Mora and Voss had reached the final threshold, the entrance to the hidden chamber where Aegis's core rested. But as they approached the massive icy gates, the ground rumbled once more. The Valari had found them. The moment the gates creaked open, the first wave of alien soldiers stormed the area, weapons raised. They were fast, their movements impossibly quick, their glowing eyes focused on the team. "Defend the core!" Voss shouted, aiming his rifle at the advancing soldiers. But the Valari were overwhelming. For every shot that connected, 2 more soldiers advanced, their weapons cutting through the team's defenses. Dr. Mora grabbed the device from her waist and pressed the activation button. The core inside the chamber began to pulse again, brighter, stronger. "Hold them off," she yelled, her voice desperate. Voss, his face grim with determination, turned to fight back. "We won't let them take this," he said, raising his rifle and unleashing a burst of energy. "Earth's not giving up yet." Above, the Valari fleet was regrouping. They had underestimated the power of Aegis, but they had no intention of being defeated so easily. Their ships circled again, their weapons recharged, ready for a final assault. But then something changed. The pulse from Aegis intensified, and for the first time the Valari ships started to lose their composure. The energy burst had a mind of its own, tearing through the atmosphere and pushing the alien ships back. The core was waking. Back on the ground, Zane and his group had reached the heart of the battle. The ground was cracked open from the power of Aegis's pulses, and the air shimmered with a dangerous energy. Zane's heart hammered in his chest as he glanced around, searching for any sign of Dr. Mora and her team, and then he saw them. The distant figure of Voss firing back at the Valari soldiers. "We're not too late," Zane whispered, gripping his weapon tighter. "We fight together." With no more hesitation, the group surged forward. Zane's voice rang out over the battlefield, rallying the survivors to charge. Earth's last stand starts now. As the battle intensified, the pulse of Aegis roared to life once again, surging across the battlefield, washing over the Valari forces with an unstoppable force. The ships were no longer able to withstand the power of Earth's last defense. They exploded one by one as the energy took hold, rending the alien vessels into nothingness. But the Valari were not going down quietly. With their final push, they unleashed a counterstrike, a barrage of energy that streaked across the sky, aimed directly at the core of Aegis. The world held its breath as the two powers collided in a burst of blinding light. And then, the world went silent. When the light faded, all that remained was the ruin of the battlefield. The Valari ships were gone. The remnants of their forces lay scattered across the ice, and Aegis, the weapon that had changed the course of history, remained, its pulse now still. Earth had fought back.